is Dr. Syed Haider, and we're going to do a live stream. I don't know if anyone's going to watch because it's election night in the US, but if you're not glued to the screen watching the election results come in, feel free to listen to some Q&A about medicine. And if you have any questions, drop them in the chat or in a reply to this live stream. So I'm just going to go over, as usual, the first the set questions that we have saved from the last week, and we have about 6 of them. And then once I've read through the questions, I'll go back and answer them. So Steve Johnson asks, I'm living with Sjogren's autoimmune disease. What can I do? And I'll start with the vaccine. Blosser Phillip says, here's my question. Can we trust all these compounding pharmacies or the pharmacies that fill our prescriptions, sometimes giving us something other than what's prescribed? The reason I ask is when I got a prescription for ivermectin, I taste the powder inside the capsules and I find a great range of differences in how the powder tastes. Sometimes it tastes like it's mostly sugar. J.M. Ritter says, COVID gave me Graves' disease. I had to have my thyroid removed. Where do I go from here? Patricia Henderson says, sinus congestion since COVID. Any recommendations? Sandy Worrell says, last week you talked about reframing the trauma we've been through and letting go of the power they have over us. How do you do that? And Debbie Yandrong says, if a person had COVID and shedding, what should one do to protect themselves? So yeah, we'll go through these and some good questions here. So Steve, the one who's living with Sjogren's disease after the vaccine. So it's an autoimmune disease. And the idea with autoimmune diseases is that, like our idea, basically, of the reason people have autoimmune diseases. And so this one, to go into a little bit more detail about it, it attacks the glands that produce tears and saliva. So the eyes, the mouth, you can have some dryness, burning, itching, redness, watering in your eyes, not making enough saliva. It can affect other areas as well. It can, in some patients, cause joint issues, muscle pain, fatigue, even coughing and running, nosebleeds. So the idea here is that the immune system is doing the right thing, creating these symptoms. It's basically identified tissues where there are toxins or pathogens that have infiltrated the tissues. So in Sjogren's, it's those tissues that are inflamed are the ones where your immune system is trying to go in and get the toxins and the pathogens out. Now, when you treat an autoimmune, quote unquote, treat an autoimmune disease with a steroid or other immunosuppressant drugs, and there's many of these immunosuppressant drugs. So basically, all the autoimmune treatments that we have are some form of immunosuppressant. So basically, what you're doing is you are hobbling your immune system, preventing it from doing its job and getting rid of the thing that's causing the real problem, right? The immune system has identified that there are enemy forces, inside certain tissues that are infiltrating those cells. They're inside the cells, they're inside the tissues, and they may be multiplying, right? And so your immune system goes and destroys the cells that have been affected and infected, and then the tissue makes new ones from stem cells. And this process can take time. It can take weeks, it can take months. So there's this discomfort that might go on for a period of time, but then your quote unquote disease is gone because your immune system has gotten rid of the real problem. Whereas when you cover it up and you force the immune system to stop taking care of the real problem, the disease becomes chronic. So it probably was, the vaccine was probably the last straw, but there were probably other toxins and pathogens that were already affecting those tissues, leading you in the direction of developing Sjogren's disease. And then this was the icing on the cake. This was the thing that tipped the scales. So the solution is the same solution essentially for every disease, and it is to help your body remove toxins and pathogens and not get in its way by covering up or stopping or hobbling or preventing the immune system from doing its job. So, I mean, the exact course of action depends. It depends on you and your exact issues, and how well you tolerate different treatments and how quickly you can go. So, you have to assume that you have a mix of toxins and a mix of pathogens. So, toxins are substances like heavy metals, microplastics, chemicals, pesticides, stuff like that we've all been exposed to over the years. And then pathogens are infectious microorganisms, right? Like parasites, viruses, bacteria. And so one of the toxins will be the spike protein. And people who got the shot had a higher likelihood of getting infected and getting sick with COVID itself. So there could also be active COVID replication in those tissues, possibly. I mean, that's one of the theories. Um, so the basic cure for disease is to help your body do detox on an ongoing continual basis, and this is mostly a head and neck area issue. So the head and neck detox cream that Hakeem Shabazz has developed is incredibly effective for detoxing the head and neck area. um, so it's basically a homemade cream. Let me see if I can drop the link again. So we've dropped the link a number of times. I guess we should post it somewhere. It is on the blog at blog.mygotodoc.com. If you search for the blog topic that was brain detox or something like that. But there's a Google document as well. So there's the link. So you make that cream at home, and then you massage it into your neck, all around your neck, right? And then you get like a long strip of t-shirt or some sort of castor oil pack and soak it in castor oil and wrap your neck, wrap around that thing. The directions are there. There's, mostly just easy to find stuff. And then there's one thing that has to be ordered from overseas, but it's also easy to find. I think it's on Amazon. So that's B. propolis. Yeah. There's a specific brand that we link in the directions, but the rest of the stuff is things like turmeric, chondroitin, hemp seed oil, olive oil, castor oil, DMSO, ginkgo biloba, sunflower lecithin, and just a little bit of water, and then you put it in a blender basically, and you have to reblend it a couple of times just to get the liposomes formed from the lecithin. So that's the basic approach, and then you give your body all the nutrients and nourishment that it needs, while you're removing the harmful things, and then the disease goes away. And this can take weeks, it can take months, but it is possible for anyone to get better and anyone to heal if they're willing to do the work. Most people are going to try to take shortcuts. They're going to try to just like, okay, well, if that's the way you treat this, then I'm just going to take some antimicrobials, some ivermectin and this and that, different antimicrobials, maybe herbal ones, maybe prescription ones. I'm going to take anti-parasitic drugs. Ivermectin's one of them. There's others. And I'm going to take, something like chlorella or activated charcoal or something to help me detox. So this might help some people. We haven't really seen it be tremendously beneficial, this kind of haphazard approach that doesn't ask you to change much. So you really need to kind of buckle down and buckle up, because it's a bumpy road. And but it's really not that hard, right? So almost everyone in the modern world has enough time to do what it takes. It might take a few hours, but you just get up a little earlier, you go to sleep a little earlier, you spend a little bit less time on your phone, or the time that you spend on your phone, you're also, doing the protocol. So it's definitely doable. But it usually does require significant change to your diet. It's not going to be your forever diet. It's going to be a short-term healing detox diet, but it's going to be very different than what most people are used to. And that's the hardest part for most people. And then most people, if not everyone, would really, really benefit and probably need to do something, a lot of things to help boost their liver's ability to detox. And one of the strongest means of doing that is coffee enemas. So it's like, you know, some people are just refuse to do it. I have people in my own family. I've been like trying to push them to do it, and they're just like, no way, I'm not going to do it. But maybe they're getting there. They're headed in the direction of eventually trying it. But yeah, I mean, you might need to do some weird stuff and some hard stuff for a few months. And I'm basically here trying to like convince people that it's worth it, because you will not only fix the problem that you're aware of, you'll fix a lot of other problems that you're completely unaware of that are brewing, right? Just beneath the surface. And they're coming towards you, right? They're in your future. So if you have any medical problems, if you run the clock forward, there will be more. The ones that you have will get worse, and there will be other ones that you don't have, especially if you use modern medicine to treat them. And the reason is that modern medicine and most of alternative medicine, like 99% of alternative medicine, also has a completely wrong-headed approach, because they fundamentally don't address the root causes. Even functional medicine, they say that they address the root causes, but they oftentimes don't. They oftentimes just cover it up with hormones, bioidentical hormones, and even when they're using things that might be good to use, or like natural approaches, herbs and supplements, sometimes their intent is wrong, and so they overdo it, right? Like they're focusing on getting rid of the symptoms and not really rooting out the deepest root causes. So, I mean, I've studied functional medicine, I've done functional medicine, and that's what I saw on the ground. The reality of functional medicine was that most of the time, like, they had some tests, a lot of expensive tests that they would do, and if they didn't find anything wrong on there, then it was just the same as like any kind of Western medicine, where it's just covering up the symptoms. And the problem with the tests is that they don't show the problem that is actually there. So if you test for, like parasites, you usually don't find them. And yet, if you treat somebody appropriately with the right diet and the right changes and the right, the coffee enemas, and then you do the anti-parasitic treatments, and you do it for a month or so, you will see parasites coming out of essentially everyone. All right. So, and we've tried treating them with the antiparasitics without doing the work, right? Without doing the diet and the coffee enemas and everything else, right, in the protocol. And oftentimes the parasites don't die, right? Like the reason is that these microorganisms are in these communities protected by this kind of mucus layer that they secrete, and they're superorganism communities where it's like multiple organisms working together, for their benefit and not ours. So it's like these are biofilms, right? That probably have not only parasites but also bacteria and viruses and all kinds of things, all mixed together and all working together against you. And those biofilms, those mucus layers, protect them from stuff coming in. So you need to recruit your own immune system, right? Like you need to be boosting your immune system and getting rid of toxins so that your own body can help break down the microfilms. And then the antiparasitics and the antimicrobial drugs and herbs that you're taking are helping your body, right? But your body needs to pull its own weight. And most people don't do the work of getting their body to pull its own weight. They just rely on the pills and the stuff that they can take easily, and that oftentimes doesn't work. And even when you do see parasite die off or you start to feel better or whatever, it's not like a full frontal assault. So what that ends up doing is it means that maybe you kill some like surface layers of the problem. You get rid of some superficial layers of the microbial communities that are affecting you, that have overgrown, or the pathogens. But there's a deeper layer and they run and hide essentially inside your body, because you haven't provided a full frontal assault that just wipes them out. So in order for a full frontal assault to even be possible, you need to do the work, and you need your body to be on board. All right, so Blosser says, here's my question. Can we trust all these compounding pharmacies? Are the pharmacies that fill our prescriptions sometimes giving us something other than what's prescribed? The reason I ask is that when I get a prescription for ivermectin, for example, I taste the powder inside the capsules and I find a great range of differences in how the powder tastes. Sometimes it tastes like it's mostly sugar, other times like cornstarch, that gets kind of gummy inside the mouth. Other times it's more grainy and only mildly sweet. It makes me wonder whether some of these compounding pharmacies can be trusted. Obviously, they're making a killing on some of these meds like ivermectin when $5 will buy you enough of the horse-based version to treat several horses. Yeah, so I don't doubt that compounding pharmacies are giving you actual ivermectin in the United States of America. They would be risking their license and sued into oblivion if they didn't. And the reason it tastes different is because they have different fillers. So they have to give you a capsule which is like an appropriate size, not too tiny, not too large. And so the amount of ivermectin in that capsule can vary tremendously. Like there's a huge variation because the powder that is the actual pure ivermectin is a very small part of the capsule. So our compounding pharmacies, like you can get a 12 milligrams of ivermectin in one capsule, or you can get like 36 or 72 maybe. You can get like huge amounts of ivermectin in each capsule if you want. So they have to have a lot of filler. So there's a lot of filler in the capsule to make up the rest of the space, and it just depends on what filler a particular pharmacy uses that it's going to taste like this or like that, right? So the taste all depends on the filler, not on the ivermectin, which is a very minor amount of the quantity inside the capsule. So, yeah. J.M. Ritter says, COVID gave me Graves' disease. I had to have okay, so sorry. Let's go back to Blosser's question about the ivermectin. Now, people, they think maybe the horse paste is fine, the U.S. horse paste. But what I can say is that the highest level of quality control happens in the United States for human medications. There's a lower level of quality control for animal medications, especially something over the counter. So you have to take that into account. And then there's like zero quality control if you're buying direct from a foreign country, and especially if you're buying one of their local brands. The people in India and Mexico and China, they don't trust their own local brands, okay, for medication. That's what I've seen. I've been to these countries and the locals won't even, they would prefer to get a foreign made brand from the US or from Europe, right? That's the locals' preference, right? So now foreigners are going to these countries and they're specifically buying the local brands that are cheaper and they're buying them direct, right? Now, people will say, well, all the US, bulk medications come from India and from Mexico and from China or whatever, right? Mostly India and China. And the difference is that all of these third world countries, they have factories that make stuff for export, and then they have factories that make stuff for the local market. These are like worlds apart, okay? They are completely different. Like if you're in India and you want to create your own medication brand in India and start selling it, or if you want to create your own clothing brand in India and start selling clothing into India, and you go to one of the quality factories that makes export quality stuff, they are so busy exporting everything that they have no time for you. They will not sell you product in India. They will only sell to the export market. So once they've gotten to the quality level of being able to find an export partner in the international market, they will be so careful not to let their quality level drop, right? They will dot all the I's, cross all the T's, get independent verification, testing, everything, right? They do all of that, right? So see if you can get independently verified toxicity testing on like a local Indian brand or Chinese brand that's selling in their local market. You're not going to get it, all right? You're just consumers are buying this stuff. They have no clue what's in it. It's probably dirt, okay? Or, literal powdered sugar or something, right? And I had a patient that had American ivermectin, European ivermectin, and Indian ivermectin. And the American and the European seemed fine. And then the Indian one, when she took it, it gave her chest pain. So there's all kinds of stuff in it. Even if it's got ivermectin, it might be laced with other stuff that it's just not tested for, right? It's not, there's no quality control. So people really need to understand this. And the other thing is it's not even cheaper, okay, to buy the overseas stuff usually, right? On a milligram per milligram basis, if you get your milligram dosage of ivermectin capsule, usually it's going to be far cheaper to go through us and get a prescription from me, pay for the prescription and pay for the compounding pharmacy to make the medication. That whole thing on a dose by dose basis will be cheaper than buying it direct from India or from China or from Mexico, and you'll get it faster, and you won't have to. I don't think you should worry at all, right? Like you should have faith that basically just this is just like economics, right? Like people's just acting in their own best interest to make sure that they don't lose their international business. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Now, whether, and usually it's also cheaper to get actual compounded pharmacy medication through us than it is even to get animal medication, again, on a dose by dose basis, like milligram by milligram basis, if you're getting like a big enough capsule of ivermectin with the right dose in it. If you're getting a very, very low dose, like 3 milligrams or something, it's not going to be the case. And I don't know, I haven't checked the pricing for horse paste and how much is in it. But in general, when I went and checked the prices of like animal medications, like you can buy like fish amoxicillin and you can buy like, all kinds of animal antibiotics, sometimes over the counter. But they're not actually cheaper than using us. I mean, they might be cheaper. They're definitely cheaper than using like a retail pharmacy. But so yeah. So if you use us and use one of our compounding pharmacy partners, and some compounding pharmacies are really expensive. We searched out compounding pharmacies that were not expensive, that were good quality and didn't overcharge. So we can get you the best deal, and we basically have a low cost guarantee. Like you won't find anyone who's cheaper than us overall. All right, so let's move on. J.M. Ritter says, COVID gave me Graves' disease. I had to have my thyroid removed. Where do I go from here? So, how did people treat like terrible thyroid disease 300 years ago? They basically just ate thyroid gland, right? They went to their butcher, they got the thyroid gland, and they ate it. And still today we use that exact same treatment, right? Nature-throid, these natural thyroid things are essentially, porcine thyroid gland ground up and pressed into these capsules. So you don't necessarily have to use porcine or the pig thyroid. You can use bovine. You can use any animal's thyroid is going to have thyroid in it, thyroid hormone in it. It's just not going to be standardized, right? So that's one thing. If you don't have a thyroid, then usually you need to take thyroid hormone, unless there were like scraps of thyroid tissue that remained and then they grew back, and who knows, right? Like it might be possible. But yeah, if an organ is entirely removed, is it possible for that to regrow? Maybe, but that's like really on the fringes of possibility and even believability. So like if you can't even bring yourself to believe it's possible, it's usually not possible. But for the right person, with the right training, maybe they can regrow a gland that's been removed. But anyway, I mean, that's like totally super speculative. Short of that, right? Like what do? You just have to take thyroid. And the best thyroid is natural thyroid from the gland of an animal that has thyroid hormone inside of it. So that would be my basic approach. And I know people who are perfectly fine. That's what they do. They go to the butcher, they freeze dried thyroid, and they just like figure out how much they need every day. And they'll grind it all up and freeze dry it, but or they might grind up a few thyroids, right, just to like create a paste that is like evenly mixed, right, so that all the thyroid is evenly distributed, or all the thyroid hormone within the thyroid is evenly distributed. So that's the basic approach. And obviously some people will just want to take medication or something, in which case usually T3 plus T4 is going to be better than just T4. and sometimes makes a huge world of difference. So T3 is the active form of thyroid, and then if you're still not feeling good, then you need to address the gut microbiome, but and other things, right? Inflammation, toxins, all the things that you need to address regularly, you need to address if you have had your thyroid removed. But yeah, I mean, it's possible to lead a super healthy life without, your thyroid if you do the right things. But I would caution against just focusing on thyroid hormone replacement. You got to look at the problem comprehensively, because you can optimize your thyroid hormone levels and still feel terrible because other things are not optimized. So the fact that you had Graves' disease, it means that you probably have other autoimmune inflammation in other organs and other parts of your body that is just silent inflammation that you're not aware of. So you need to get rid of the inflammation, the toxins, the pathogens, and do a deep detox. I mean, and how you do that, again, it's like it varies person to person, but usually it involves changing your diet dramatically, something like an autoimmune paleo diet, eating organs, broth, drinking broth, doing coffee enemas, taking certain supplements, and then just being patient. So chlorella, and taking certain antimicrobials like chlorine dioxide and certain herbal antimicrobials, and sometimes prescription antimicrobials as well. Patricia says, sinus congestion since COVID, any recommendations? So go read my blog post on chronic sinusitis at blog.mygotodoc.com. If it is chronic sinusitis, I mean, it could be like chronic, like allergies or something. But chronic sinusitis is essentially like a amalgamation. It's like a conglomeration of allergies and infections and all kinds of stuff. But when they tested people with the diagnosis of chronic sinusitis, they found that like 99.9% had fungal infections, and something like 76%, 80%, all their symptoms went away when they took antifungals. Now you have to be aware that usually things are not what they seem. Okay, so there's usually a deeper layer to everything. So yes, let's assume that almost all chronic sinusitis is fungal, essentially. You have to ask, why are the fungi there? It's not that just that there were some spores like floating around the air and you happened to get some spores and now you got an infection. Why did it infect you and not your neighbor or not your somebody else who lives with you, your housemate? And the reason is that your nose was weakened by something, by toxins, by pathogens. And so fungi, what they do is they proliferate anywhere in the environment, in the natural world, in our bodies, in trees, in our tissues, in the soil, in other animals. Like, they are normally present, and they increase in numbers and they grow more when there are toxins present. And so they actually help to bind toxins. They sequester toxins, so they're actually helping you. That's why they're overgrown in the sinuses, if that's what's happening. And if you kill them, all of a sudden, all the toxins that they've sequestered, that they bound up and prevented your tissues from being exposed to, will suddenly be released along with dead cellular components of fungi, and that can make you really, really sick. So you got to do it slowly. You got to do it gradually. You got to do detox, head and neck detox cream, clarified butter in the nostrils in the morning and the evening, 1 milliliter on both sides, and lie down for 10 minutes with your head back. And other, detox things like sweating and, optimizing bowel movements and doing, certain kinds of enemas, and just supporting all the detox pathways, because you can help draw the toxins out of the brain, but then if they don't actually exit the body, they'll just recirculate right back into the brain, right? So they're coming out in your blood and in your lymphatics, and then and then from there, the blood and lymphatics will take them to the kidneys and to the liver and to the skin, and you have to sweat them out, and you got to, go to the bathroom and urinate and defecate them out. Otherwise, they just recirculate right back where they came from. So you have to support those pathways while you're also supporting the detox. And then once they end up in the stool, for example, you also have to have binders in there to bind them and take them out. Otherwise, they'll go from your stool right back into your body, right? So there's a recirculation in the gut also. So that's where chlorella and bentonite clay and activated charcoal, stuff like that comes in, and zeolite and those things. So what I've realized, the longer I've practiced, is that all the answers are out there. It's not like there's some big secret, right? It's not like there's some like special thing that you have to travel to, the Orient to find. You don't have to pay somebody millions of dollars to discover it for you or to give you the secret to healing. There's actually too much information. And the problem is that like people actually end up doing too much. And for not long enough, right? So it's like a mile wide, an inch deep kind of problem, where if they just really focused on the key things that they need and went really deep on those and waited and just were patient and continued and had faith and like a belief that it would work, which comes from knowledge, right? I'm not saying that you should have like misplaced faith. I'm not saying that you should have, faith, just, wishful thinking kind of faith, right? What I'm saying is that you learn enough yourself to begin to believe really strongly that this thing you're doing will work. Because you've gone to somebody who's treated thousands of other people and it worked for them, and that person is able to transmit to you the belief that they have from what they've seen to you, right? That you can heal if you follow their directions. And because you've heard of testimonials or you've talked to other people who've gotten better, and because you've had all your questions answered, like how can this work when it's people with this problem, they don't heal, right? Like I see people all the time, like, or like if it worked, why doesn't everyone do it? Like people have a lot of questions, and we can answer all of those questions, objections, everything. We can make it make sense. We can explain to you how this actually works. So that's the solution. Sinus congestion, so like one person, like in that sinusitis article, I give a couple of like example cases, and like what worked for them may work for you, but it may not. You might need some specific things. There might be some key things that a specific person needs. So I just want you to keep people to keep that in mind, that just because you see online like a protocol that worked for one person doesn't mean that that protocol will work for every person who has the same problem, because underneath the label, underneath the diagnosis, it's going to be different, right? The causes will have there's going to be some differentiation of causes beneath the level of the diagnosis. So sinus congestion in this person, sinus congestion in that person, it'll be different in some way, right? There will be some differences, and there's going to be a lot of overlap, but sometimes the differences are important enough that they make all the difference in the treatment protocol. Sandy says, last week you talked about reframing the traumas we've been through and letting go of the power they have over us. Is there a program or book you recommend for helping us do this? So it's mostly like done by just talking to somebody who understands the right framing and is good at like communicating that to other people. So somebody like Hakeem Shabazz, he's basically doing a form of psychotherapy, but it's not like, the psychotherapy that people think of when they think of the psychotherapy. It's, but it's kind of like rubs off on people, right? Like you have to spend time with people who like help to reorient you, because their own perspective is reoriented. So it just rubs off. So it doesn't really require that much effort beyond just like talking to somebody once in a while about your feelings and your thoughts. And one little trick, that is super effective is once you understand the perspective and you accept it, right? and that requires sometimes a conversation, because you might be like, oh, well, I don't believe that, you know, what you're saying, I don't believe it because of this, right, and because of that, and you know, you have these objections where you're like, no, that doesn't make sense, and then the person explains it more, so eventually the person explains it well enough that you're like, oh, and it clicks, and you're like, oh, okay. But it hasn't really sunk in really deeply yet, right? It's at a superficial level of understanding and belief, right? Like it's intellectual, it's not emotional or like deeper yet. And in order for it to get deeper, you have to like sometimes practice shifting out of your automatic, you know, mindset into the right mindset, the healthy mindset. And so you start to notice during your life, right? Like if you're trying to stop like getting frustrated about the world, right? Frustrated about situations that go against you, right? Like you're like fighting the universe essentially. Um, so like every time you start feeling yourself getting frustrated and raising your voice and like acting out and being like, you know, ridiculous, you have a little rubber band around your wrist and you just like pull it and let it snap back on your wrist. So it kind of like snaps you out of it, and you remind yourself that like I have no control. I'm not God, right? Like I have to have some humility here, right? And I just have to like I just need to accept, you know, this is the situation. I'm in traffic, or I missed my flight, or I'm running late, or whatever, right? It's okay. This is just the universe. And when you start to act appropriately, the universe starts to treat you appropriately also, right? It stops sending you all these like terrible situations. The reason those terrible situations are coming is to remind you of like who you are and what you are, and to so that you can correct the way you're behaving. You're basically misbehaving, and the misbehavior is creating the situations at a deeper level. It's just not something that people are aware of, right? They're inviting into their life these like screwed up situations. The reason everything happens to people is because of themselves. That's like the key insight to healing, is that you have no problem except yourself. You are your only problem. And that goes for everyone, right? So this is like a metaphysical kind of like, you know, perspective, but this is the truth. And even if it weren't true, believing it's true is far more beneficial than believing it's false. All right. So believing that, because what this means is you take radical responsibility for everything that happens to you. You do not blame it on anyone else. And you are the only one that you have radical control over, right? So if you set it as your starting point, the assumption that everything happens because of me, then you empower yourself to change your life, to change anything in your life, right? You don't blame anyone else for anything. You only blame yourself, and you try to figure out, how could I overcome this? How could I make it so these situations don't happen to me anymore? What can I change so that my relationships change? What can I change so that my health changes? Not, you know, oh, you know, it's the vaccine, it's the this, it's the that, it's the toxins that they're spewing into the environment. I have no control over that. You know, it's the stuff floating down from the, you know, the jet stream, you know, the stuff they're injecting into the air. It's the EMFs, it's the cell towers, it's the this, it's the that. Like that leaves you powerless. There is no way you can fix all of that stuff. And I'm not saying that none of that stuff affects you. What I'm saying is that you can overcome all of that stuff, right? And at a deeper level, the reason it does affect you, the reason you're weak enough that it can affect you, that it can harm you, is because of you, right? So you weaken yourself, you weaken your own body with your emotions and your beliefs, and those like draw towards you physical things that help to manifest the problem to you, right? Because we're not aware of these subtle levels. Like, you know, people are living and they're like completely unaware of what they're feeling because they're covering all up, right? They're just medicating themselves, you know, they're numbing themselves out. And so your body is trying to send you the message of what's wrong, what's really wrong with you, at the deeper level, by manifesting it physically in the form of disease. All right. So yeah, I don't really, you know, there are some tools and stuff, but like you're gonna end up spending more and wasting your time and whatever. Just go to Hakeem Shabazz, okay? Like There are people who specialize in stuff like this, mind body medicine, all kinds of stuff. The really, really good ones are overwhelmingly busy. Okay. Like there's this amazing doctor who published Healing Beyond Pills and Potions. You can't even get in to see him. Like it's just for friends and family at this point. I mean, he's so overwhelmingly busy. Hakeem Shabazz hasn't gotten there yet, although he is extremely busy. I mean, he like carved out like an hour or two, like 5 days a week for my patients, right? Like he is like super busy. I mean, like he he's so busy. Like I don't think he'll be available for much longer. Like eventually he'll get to the point where he's so busy that he can't take patients, and he's just going to have to teach people how to do what he does. So in the meantime, I mean, like he turns down a lot of people, right? So like not everyone is cut out for it, right? So yeah, it's that. So I would just say go to Hakeem Shabazz, mygotodoc.com/Hakeem, and he'll help you to reframe the trauma. Yeah, it really requires somebody who has some wisdom, a lot of experience. So a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom. They can read people. They understand what different symptoms and diseases actually mean, so they can actually guess or like see what your emotional and psychological problems likely are, and just tell you, right? And they can extrapolate from the stuff you tell them to other stuff you haven't told them, right? Even about your physical health. They'll be like, oh, you probably have this and that. And that's what it's like talking to him. Like he'll be able to convince you that he knows what he's talking about. And that's really important too, being convinced that the person you're talking to knows what they're talking about and that they can help you. That's an important part of healing, that belief. It creates a placebo effect, if you want to call it that. Debbie says, if a person had COVID and shedding, what should one do to protect themselves? I can't watch, so can you answer on here? So Anis, you have to, I don't know, transcribe or something, or clip this answer and put it wherever Debbie Yundrong asked her question, which I think is probably in the Facebook group. That's where we get most of our questions. So if you guys aren't in the Facebook group, check it out. I think it's Long Haul Reset on Facebook. Probably like 6,000 people at this point, maybe a little bit more now. They mostly just share stuff between themselves, all the stuff that they've done that's working. And I'll get to Jacqueline, to your question in a second about topical DMSO. All right, so how do you protect yourself? So the greatest protection is just being healthy. So, and detoxing and getting healthy to begin with. And almost everyone in America, if I went and talked to them, and around the world in any industrialized country, many of them would say I'm healthy. Like if you ask them, and that's a great thing to believe about yourself. But if you push them, a little bit, all kinds of little minor symptoms and complaints and things will start to pour out. And, like they'll take over-the-counter medications, rather frequently for whatever, reflux, constipation, headaches, aches and pains, this and that, right? And that's a sign that you're really not healthy yet, right? So if you have any of that kind of stuff going on, rashes, et cetera, recurrent things like recurrent infections, recurrent UTIs, recurrent yeast infections, anything, then you're not really healthy. If you have a little trouble sleeping, a little trouble waking up, if you feel a little tired, if you this and that, right? That's not normal. So you need to fix that stuff, and that's going to be the greatest benefit. But you're going to get the greatest benefit from that, and then getting a lot of sun. I have not seen anything in the world, no supplement, no food, nothing at all. It's as strong as just getting a lot of sun, getting a tan, and with that, sleeping well, right? So you sleep properly, you sleep well, you don't stay up. You basically wear the blue blocker sunglasses, the 99% blue blocker sunglasses at a minimum. That's the bare minimum, right? The maximum is you don't even turn the lights off when the sun sets. I'm sorry, you don't turn the lights on when the sun sets. You don't even turn them on. And when you do that, when you protect yourself from artificial light at night, you will start to fall asleep within 2 hours of sunset. That's when you get tired naturally. And then you'll wake up early, And then you go outside, you get your morning sun, you get your afternoon sun, you get your late afternoon sun, and then the sun goes down and you go to sleep. So, and you gotta uncover as much skin as possible in the mid-afternoon when you can get the vitamin D. And so it's not just vitamin D, it's a lot of hormones. It's pro-opiomelanocortin is like a pro hormone that has like 10 hormones that break off from it. So pro-opiomelanocortin is only produced by sun. If you don't get sun, you don't get it. And so you're literally not making certain hormones when you don't go outside in the sun and get UVB, which is blocked by window glass, by the way, right? Or much of it's blocked by window glass. So you're not getting a full dose of this very important set of 10 hormones, crucial hormones, okay, for immunity and for health in general. And most people are getting other hormones. They're getting complete hormonal disruption because they're not getting the light cycle signals of now the sun has risen, now the sun has gone down, which synchronize your circadian rhythms, which tell your body how much and when to produce all of your other hormones, right? All the other hormones that you will make, even if you don't go out in the sun, but they won't be made in the right quantities at the right times without your circadian rhythms being synchronized. So getting healthy, getting sun, getting good sleep, there's nothing can come close, okay? Everything else is like a rounding error compared to these things. Taking vitamin D, taking vitamin C, taking all these things, ivermectin, all that stuff in terms of prevention, they're like rounding errors for the top three things. In terms of strength. Now, even the rounding errors can be really strong if you just use them, but they're not the strongest protection, right? So ivermectin can itself prevent infection, but it depends on how big of a dose you get, how wiped out you are to begin with. And so it's not 100%. Maybe it's 80% now. Maybe it's 90%. I don't know, right? So it's definitely not 100%. A lot of people have gotten COVID while they were on ivermectin. A lot of people have been affected by shedding while they were on ivermectin. It's a very common occurrence nowadays. So it's not anywhere near 100%. But then if you stack it with a bunch of other stuff, like you do copper wand sweeps of your nostrils and your mouth, multiple times a day, and you do gargling and nasal rinses with betaine hydrochloride or iodine or hydrogen peroxide or even chlorine dioxide maybe, and you do nasal rinses with normal saline, and so you can combine all those things too. So doing stuff like that is really helpful. Minimizing EMF exposure is quite helpful, but really it's just and megadosing on vitamin C at the first sign of illness can oftentimes help. It boosts bifidobacteria levels. I've personally benefited from it, and other people I know have as well. IPC Gold, or is it IPC Gold? IP6. There's a supplement. I'm blanking on it. It's IP6 Gold. Immune support formula that can help. A lot of people swear by that. So those are some things that you can get that will help prevent getting sick. And then the usual stuff that everyone was talking about last pandemic and still talks about. Vitamin D, I think it's fine. It should be gotten from sun long term, midterm. On a chronic basis. But if you're coming down with something and you want a little extra oomph, you add vitamin D, in the acute phase, like right then and there. So vitamin D, vitamin C, quercetin, bromelain, all that stuff still applies. Zinc. So you can find that at mygotostack.com. And then the detox supplement I think is really beneficial, and the herbal supplement. So curcumin, Nigella sativa, dandelion. So that supplement, and then the spike detox supplement I would take. It can even be used preventatively because everyone's being exposed to this stuff constantly. So preventative for prevention, treatment, and detox, it can be used for all three. So let me see, where am I? Okay. And Jacqueline says, is topical DMSO effective in treating concussions, or does it have to be IV? It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I know that a Midwestern doctor on Substack has published a couple of articles already on DMSO, and he has a few more in the pipeline, so he would be a good person to ask. I haven't checked into, I've never had to treat a concussion, not even when I was in the hospital. I don't remember ever having a concussion come in. I mean, those are usually treated by the ER doctor, and they didn't get to me. I was a hospital doctor. All right, so it looks like we have a few questions from Facebook. We'll answer those. All right. Nigel, I think, says, I work with cold water showers daily. The last 12 months, it's boosted my immune system, depleted inflammation, made me happier, allowed me to get my life back after 2.5 years of existence with long COVID. Why don't more people start using it as therapy? I love cold water therapy. It's what made the difference for me too. So I used to talk about it all the time. I just haven't thought about it for a while. But yeah, cold water showers, like the way it feels to me is it's like a hard reset or maybe a soft reset. Like it's like a kick in the seat of the pants, right? Like it made such a dramatic and fast difference for me. Like I was like 95% better maybe, but sometimes when I was more stressed out or eating poorly or not sleeping well, like I would get, like, the anxiety would come back, the insomnia would come back, the pounding in my neck would come back every time I lied down to go to sleep. And the cold water showers just like went to zero. It felt like it just happened immediately. Like in the first week maybe of starting, or it wasn't a cold water shower. I was doing cold plunges. So I bought a chest freezer, plugged it in, filled it up with water, and then I would unplug it, right before I jumped in. So it was freezing cold. It was very, very cold. So this was like a shock. It's like shock therapy. That's what it felt like to me. And if, I kind of conceived of it as something like the stellate ganglion block, where the way it's been described to me is it like shuts down the nervous system, signals entirely. The sympathetic nervous system signals completely. And then it kind of reboots, right? It's like you reboot the software, you reboot the computer, and it just goes back to factory settings, right? So that's what it felt like when I did cold water, cold plunging. And I talked about it at the FLCCC conference a couple of years ago, where I presented a case who also got better, a case in our practice, who went through our coaching program, and basically at that point didn't use any medication, just used like lifestyle stuff. And one of the big things was cold plunging. He was living in North Carolina, and it was wintertime, and he would just, on the way to work, he would stop at a river, a freezing cold river, and just like jump into it and then get out after a minute or two. So you have to work up to it, it's but yeah, it's like a shock. That's how I see it. And that works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for everyone, but I would guess that, like most things, it works for 80% of people, if not more. And it's just fantastic. Yeah, it boosts the immune system. It gets rid of inflammation. It boosts the mood. It boosts motivation. It makes people happy. And again, like the happiness and the mood boosting, like it happens immediately. I mean, it doesn't take long, and it lasts for a day or two afterwards. So the data is there, the research is there. There's not a lot of research, but there's enough to definitely try it, right? Especially since it doesn't hurt. So yeah, I totally agree with you, and I'm a big proponent of that. I found that after a few months of doing it, I didn't need to do it anymore. I don't even know how long I should have done it or actually needed to do it, but I started traveling after a couple of months and didn't do it for a couple of weeks, and I still felt fine, and I was like, okay, fine, I don't actually need it anymore. But yeah, while yeah, I mean, it made a huge difference for me, so I highly recommend people try it. Sauna can work similarly, right? So it's not as sudden of a shock, but it can create this like stress situation and give you a lot of the benefits of exercise when you can't exercise. So sauna can be really, really beneficial too. one of the things that cold plunging does is it activates heat shock proteins, which are also activated by sauna. They're kind of like misnamed heat shock proteins, but it's more like stress shock proteins, or but anyway, heat activates those as well. So just in the heat, with the cold plunge, it's like all of a sudden you get that stress, like it's a sudden shot of stress and adrenaline and everything, right? It ramps up the sympathetic nervous system. And the way I imagined it was that since you're like all of a sudden overwhelming your body with sympathetic, your parasympathetic slams on the brakes, right? And so the problem in a lot of people with long COVID is that their sympathetic nervous system is chronically elevated and their parasympathetic is chronically low and they're out of balance. Now, one approach is to strengthen the parasympathetic, but this approach, what it feels like to me with the cold plunging, is it like ramps up the sympathetic to 11 and that forces the parasympathetic to come back, right? To get stronger again, because it's like, it feels like it's life threatening. It feels like you're about to die when you jump into the cold plunge. So that's the way I feel about it. That's what feels like what's happening. Now with hot heat therapy, sauna and hot baths. So anyone can do it if you have a bath or get a bathtub installed or buy a, I don't know, like a big soaking tub or something. Just fill it up with hot water, and you can add some other stuff too, Epsom salt and stuff like that. With that, it's not sudden, it's like you get into water that you can stand, as hot as you can stand it, and you ease yourself in, slowly. And then you're in there and you feel okay, right? You're not sweating bullets yet, right? So you have to get to the point where you feel like getting out, and then you stay in. That's when you really get the benefit, right? Like you're like, oh my God, I'm way too hot now. I'm like, sweat's pouring down and I just feel uncomfortable. I need to get out. At that point, you force yourself to stay in for another minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And that's when you're going to get the most benefit from that stress. Alinda Mahamo says, I think I have brain inflammation and vagus nerve dysfunction, I guess. I'm having worsening tremors in my neck. My arms and hands are really bad. I had my second bout of COVID in May. My immune system is low. The doctor said, any recommendations? I've been worse since the DTaP shot in September with the tremors. So stop taking vaccines. You got to detox from the vaccines. You got to use the head and neck detox cream. I put that in the chat. Maybe you can use a vagus nerve stimulator or just do deep breathing. I mean, deep breathing works just as well if you really commit to it and do it properly. So box breathing, where you breathe in through your nose for 4 to 6 seconds, and then you hold your breath for 4 to 6 seconds, and then you breathe out for 4 to 6 seconds, and then you hold your breath for 4 to 6 seconds, and then you go back to the beginning and breathe in again. So that's box breathing. So breathe in, hold your breath, breathe out, hold your breath, and you try to do it for the same number of seconds for each one. Alternate nostril breathing. So you breathe in through your right nostril. That's how you start, and then you hold your breath, and then you breathe out through your left, and then you hold your breath again, and then you breathe in through your left, and then you hold your breath. Sorry, I messed up. You breathe in, hold your breath, breathe out, breathe in through the left again, and hold your breath, breathe out, and then you keep doing it. But it's I think it's 4, 7, 8 alternate nostril breathing. So breathe in for 4, hold your breath for 7, breathe out for 8, and then breathe in for 4, hold your breath for 7, breathe out for 8. So that's what you do. If your nostrils are open, that's better than the box breathing. But if your nostrils are clogged or something on one or both sides, then you can use the box breathing until that goes away. And then the humming or the buzzing bee breath is basically like this. You put your fingers like this, and you plug your ears with your thumbs on both sides. Take a deep breath in, and then you kind of make this humming noise and drop your head to your chest. And you can do that 5 times. Then every day you add one more until you get to 17. And you can do more than that if you want. But while you're doing it, you're focusing on this point between your eyebrows. So a soft buzzing. Sorry, I don't know if my video cut out. My computer went to sleep. Anyway, you're doing a soft humming noise, constant soft humming. So humming is really beneficial also for sinus problems. So there was a case report of a patient that just did humming for like an hour or two a day for a couple of days, and their chronic sinusitis went away. I mean, it's really powerful stuff. So it helps to calm down the nervous system, boost the immune system, rebalance, vagal nerve, function, and it's just really, really beneficial. So what you're aiming for is like do the box breathing or the alternate nostril breathing for about 15 minutes a day, and then the humming bee breath, ends up being about 10 minutes a day if you do 17 of those. But you can do more or less, so you're looking at like 25 minutes a day just of like breath work. And it sounds crazy, but it's really quite relaxing, and it's not terrible. Oh, the other thing with the buzzing bee breath, you want to put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, just behind your teeth, and make sure that your jaw is relaxed. Make sure you're relaxed, because sometimes when you do that, when you're humming and you're putting your tongue there, sometimes your jaw kind of clenches a little bit. So you got to make sure your jaw is relaxed while you're doing it. All right, everyone. I know it's election night. Don't get freaked out no matter what happens. Okay. We will be okay. And we all hope for the best outcome, but regardless of what happens, it's the will of God, and no one can fight the will of God. So things will be okay. Just, I know a lot of people are like freaking out over the election. I know it feels like the end of the world if the person you want to win doesn't win. The world's not going to end. I think we'll be all right, despite all the stuff. Yeah, I've been on Twitter. I've been on X. I see all the stuff that everyone's posting. So anyway, take it easy, relax. Do your best. Vote if you can, and vote your conscience, and just hope for the best and pray for the best, and God's in charge, so everything will be fine, even if it doesn't look like it, right? So even the things that don't look okay are okay. Everything ends up being for the best, even the stuff that looks bad in the long run, right? So in the end, things work out for the best for people who believe. Obviously they don't work out for the best for everyone, because some people end up going to hell, but they do work out usually, even in this world, for your benefit. So stuff that looks bad, stuff that seems harmful, you look back at it 10 years later and you realize that it benefited you because of the choices that you made and how it changed you. So take it easy, everyone. Good night, and Godspeed. All right, bye-bye.